Officer Greg Haskins was known around the precinct as someone who took his job seriously, but he also had a reputation for being difficult to work with. He prided himself on his years of experience and believed that his instincts were always right. On a quiet Tuesday evening, Haskins found himself patrolling one of the neighborhoods he didn't particularly like, a part of town where most residents were people of color. To him, it felt out of place, almost like these families didn't belong there. It wasn't something he openly admitted, but deep down, his biases shaped how he treated the people living in such areas. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the streets, Haskins noticed a sleek black car driving through the area. The driver was a woman wearing professional attire, her hair neatly styled, her posture confident. Something about the scene struck him as odd. Why would someone like her be here? His gut told him something wasn't right. Without much thought, he turned on his patrol car's lights and signaled for her to pull over. The woman complied without hesitation, pulling her car smoothly to the side of the road. She rolled down her window before Haskins even approached, showing no signs of nervousness or resistance. When he leaned down to speak to her, she greeted him politely, introducing herself as Dr. Evelyn Carter. Her voice carried authority, yet it was calm and composed. "Good evening, officer," she said. "Is there a reason I've been stopped?" Haskins ignored her question at first, choosing instead to focus on scrutinizing her appearance. She looked well-dressed, almost too polished for this neighborhood. That only fueled his suspicion. "Do you live around here?" he asked bluntly. "No, I don't," Evelyn replied calmly. "I'm visiting a friend nearby." Haskins raised an eyebrow. "A friend? What's their name?" Evelyn hesitated for just a moment, then answered truthfully, giving the name of the person she was meeting. But Haskins wasn't satisfied. He peppered her with more questions, asking what she did for a living, why she owned such an expensive car, and whether she had any proof of insurance. Evelyn handed over her documents without argument, explaining that she worked as a professor at a local university and occasionally consulted for government agencies. Everything checked out, but Haskins still couldn't shake off his doubts. "You seem pretty comfortable in this neighborhood," he remarked, his tone laced with sarcasm. "Not exactly your usual crowd, is it?" Evelyn met his gaze steadily. "Officer, I assure you I can visit wherever I please. My presence shouldn't raise any concerns." But Haskins wasn't convinced. He continued pressing her, accusing her of vague infractions like driving suspiciously, and implying that her reasons for being in the area weren't legitimate. At one point, he even suggested searching her car, claiming it was standard procedure. Evelyn refused, reminding him that he needed probable cause to do so. Her firmness caught him off guard. He hadn't expected her to know her rights so well. Frustration bubbled inside Haskins. Here was this woman, clearly intelligent and self-assured, challenging his authority. He didn't like it. In his mind, she should have been intimidated by now, apologetic even. Instead, she remained cool and collected, refusing to let him rattle her. Every time she answered his questions calmly, it felt like a personal affront to him. After nearly 20 minutes of back and forth, Haskins finally relented, handing back her papers. "You're free to go," he muttered gruffly, though his tone made it clear he wasn't happy about it. As Evelyn drove away, she glanced at him in her rearview mirror, shaking her head slightly. She'd dealt with people like him before, individuals who judged others based on appearances rather than facts. Still, she couldn't help feeling unsettled by the interaction. Little did she know, this encounter would soon take a dramatic turn. Meanwhile, Haskins returned to his patrol car, fuming. He replayed the stop in his head, growing angrier with each passing minute. How dare she talk back to him like that? Who did she think she was? He convinced himself that she must have been hiding something, even though nothing in her behavior suggested wrongdoing. As far as he was concerned, she was just another example of someone trying to act above the law. What Haskins didn't realize, however, was that this seemingly routine traffic stop would come back to haunt him in ways he could never imagine. For now, though, He dismissed the incident as just another frustrating part of his job, unaware that fate had already begun weaving its threads, setting the stage for a confrontation neither of them would forget anytime soon. The next morning, the atmosphere at the police station buzzed with anticipation. Officers milled about, chatting casually as they sipped their coffee and prepared for the day ahead. Chief Daniels had called an emergency meeting, a rare occurrence that immediately piqued everyone's curiosity. Rumors spread like wildfire. Was there a new policy change, a high-profile case, or perhaps budget cuts? No one knew for sure, but the air was thick with speculation. When the clock struck 9, the officers filed into the briefing room, taking their seats. The space filled quickly, the murmur of conversations fading as Chief Daniels stepped up to the podium. He was a tall man with graying hair and a no-nonsense demeanor, respected by most of his team. Today, however, he wore a small smile, hinting that whatever he was about to announce was significant. "Good morning, everyone," he began, his voice steady and clear. "As you all know, we've been working hard to improve our department's relationship with the community. It's a challenging task, but it's one we can't afford to ignore. To help us move forward, I'm pleased to introduce someone who will play a crucial role in this effort." He paused, letting the suspense build before gesturing toward the door. As it opened, Dr. Evelyn Carter walked in, her presence commanding immediate attention. She looked every bit the professional she was, dressed in a sharp navy blue suit, her posture confident yet approachable. Her eyes scanned the room, meeting the gazes of the officers as if silently acknowledging each of them. "This is Dr. Evelyn Carter," Chief Daniels continued, his tone filled with pride. "She'll be joining us as your new police captain, effective immediately. Dr. Carter brings a wealth of experience to the table. She's not only a decorated former detective but also holds advanced degrees in criminal justice and sociology. Her expertise in reforming outdated practices and fostering trust between law enforcement and communities will be invaluable to us." A ripple of whispers moved through the room. Some officers nodded approvingly, impressed by her credentials. Others exchanged skeptical glances, unsure how a newcomer would fit into their tight-knit group. Among those seated near the back was Officer Greg Haskins, whose face turned pale the moment Evelyn stepped into view. His heart sank as recognition dawned on him. This was the same woman he'd pulled over just the night before, the one he'd treated with suspicion and disdain during that traffic stop. Evelyn took a step forward, standing beside Chief Daniels as she addressed the room. "Thank you, Chief Daniels," she said, her voice warm but authoritative. "I'm honored to join such a dedicated team. My goal is simple: to ensure that we serve our community with fairness, transparency, and respect. We're here to protect and support everyone, regardless of background or circumstance. Together, I believe we can make meaningful progress." Her words resonated with many in the room, earning nods of approval. But for Haskins, each sentence felt like a dagger piercing his chest. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, avoiding eye contact as memories of the previous evening flooded his mind. He remembered the condescending questions, the baseless accusations, the way he'd dismissed her as just another person trying to act superior. Now here she was, standing above them all as their new leader. As Evelyn wrapped up her introduction, Chief Daniels instructed the officers to welcome her warmly and assist her in any way possible. The meeting concluded shortly after, and the room emptied as officers returned to their duties. Haskins lingered behind, frozen in place. His mind raced with panic. What if she recognized him? Would she hold a grudge? Could she fire him on the spot? The thought of facing her again made his stomach churn. Reluctantly, Haskins forced himself to leave the briefing room and head to his desk. He tried to act normal, pretending that nothing was wrong, but his anxiety was palpable. Throughout the morning, he kept stealing glances at Evelyn as she toured the station, meeting various members of the team. She seemed genuinely interested in getting to know everyone, asking thoughtful questions and listening intently to their responses. Her professionalism left little room for criticism, but Haskins couldn't shake the feeling that she was secretly plotting against him. Later that afternoon, Evelyn stopped by Haskins' desk while reviewing some files. Officer Haskins, correct? She asked, her tone neutral. Haskins nearly jumped out of his chair. Yes, ma'am, he stammered, his voice cracking slightly. Is there something I can help you with? I'm just going over recent reports, Evelyn replied, holding up a folder. Your name came up a few times. You've been with the department for quite a while, haven't you? Yes, ma'am, Haskins said, sweat forming on his brow. Over 20 years? That's impressive, Evelyn said, offering a polite smile. Experience like yours is invaluable. I look forward to working with you. With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Haskins feeling both relieved and uneasy. On the surface, her words were kind and professional, but he couldn't help wondering if they carried a hidden meaning. Was she mocking him? Testing him? Or simply being courteous despite what had happened? As the day wore on, Haskins grew increasingly paranoid. Every time Evelyn passed by, he tensed up, convinced she was watching him. He replayed their brief interaction in his head, searching for clues about her true intentions. Did she plan to punish him for his behavior? Would she use her position to make his life miserable? The uncertainty gnawed at him, making it difficult to focus on his work. By the time his shift ended, Haskins was exhausted, not from physical labor but from the mental toll of worrying about what might come next. As he drove home, he replayed the events of the past 24 hours, berating himself for underestimating Evelyn. How could he have been so careless? So blind? He realized now that she wasn't just any civilian. She was someone who commanded respect. Someone who could influence his career and possibly end it. That night, sleep eluded him. He tossed and turned, haunted by thoughts of what Evelyn might do. For the first time in years, Haskins questioned his own judgment. Had he let his biases cloud his decisions too often? Was this karma catching up to him? Whatever the case, one thing was certain. His life and his career was about to change in ways he couldn't predict. Little did Haskins know, Evelyn wasn't focused on revenge. Instead, she saw this situation as an opportunity, a chance to address the very issues that had led to their awkward encounter. But whether Haskins would rise to the challenge or crumble under the pressure remained to be seen. The days following Evelyn's introduction as the new police captain were a whirlwind of activity. She wasted no time diving into her responsibilities, immersing herself in the inner workings of the department. Her first order of business was to review ongoing cases and internal affairs files, looking for patterns or areas where improvements could be made. It wasn't long before she stumbled upon something troubling, a file filled with complaints against Officer Greg Haskins. The EMR documents painted a disturbing picture. Over the years, several individuals had accused Haskins of racial profiling, using excessive force, and treating them disrespectfully during interactions. None of these complaints had led to formal disciplinary action, often dismissed due to lack of evidence or deemed unfounded. But Evelyn wasn't so quick to brush them aside. To her trained eye, the pattern was clear. Haskins had a history of targeting people based on their race, particularly Black and Latino individuals. Evelyn decided to keep a close watch on him, not out of malice, but because she believed accountability was key to reforming the department. She didn't want to jump to conclusions, but she also couldn't ignore the red flags waving right in front of her. For now, she chose to observe quietly, gathering more information before taking any decisive steps. Meanwhile, Haskins was struggling to maintain his composure. Every time he saw Evelyn walking through the station, chatting with other officers or reviewing reports, his anxiety spiked. He felt like she was watching him, scrutinizing his every move. The paranoia consumed him, making it hard to focus on his duties. He started second-guessing himself, wondering if he was being too harsh during traffic stops or investigations. Was he giving her ammunition to use against him? Desperate to prove that he wasn't the problem, Haskins went out of his way to appear cooperative and professional. He greeted Evelyn warmly whenever they crossed paths, offering to assist with anything she needed. At one point, he even volunteered to lead a community outreach program aimed at improving relations between the police and local residents. Evelyn accepted his offer, though she noticed how overly eager he seemed. His behavior was almost robotic, as if he were trying too hard to impress her. Despite his efforts, Haskins' nerves continued to get the better of him. During roll calls and briefings, he avoided making direct eye contact with Evelyn, fearing she might see through his facade. When she spoke, he hung on her every word, searching for hidden messages or veiled criticisms. His colleagues began to notice his strange behavior, exchanging puzzled glances when he tripped over his words while addressing Evelyn or fumbled through routine tasks. Some joked about it behind his back, teasing him for acting like a nervous rookie. Others grew concerned, sensing that something deeper was going on. One afternoon, Evelyn assigned Haskins to patrol a neighborhood known for its diversity, a mix of families from different backgrounds. It was part of her strategy to integrate officers into communities they hadn't traditionally engaged with. Haskins reluctantly agreed, though inwardly, he dreaded the assignment. As he drove through the streets, memories of his encounter with Evelyn replayed in his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was some sort of test, a way for her to catch him slipping up. His fears weren't entirely unfounded. While patrolling, he pulled over a young black man driving an older model car. The driver looked startled, but complied without resistance, handing over his license and registration when asked. Haskins examined the documents carefully, then launched into a series 6 of questions. Where was he headed? Who did he know in the area? Why was he driving this particular route? The young man answered politely, explaining that he was visiting a friend who lived nearby. But Haskins wasn't satisfied. Something about the situation felt off to him, though he couldn't pinpoint why. He pressed harder, his tone growing sharper with each question. The driver remained calm, but frustration flickered across his face. Sensing tension escalating, a bystander nearby recorded the interaction on their phone, capturing Haskins' increasingly aggressive demeanor. Unbeknownst to Haskins, news of the incident spread quickly. Within hours, footage of the stop appeared on social media, sparking outrage among community members. Calls poured into the station demanding answers and accountability. Evelyn received multiple messages about the video, prompting her to investigate further. When she reviewed the recording herself, she saw exactly what she'd feared. Haskins behaving in a manner that reinforced stereotypes and eroded trust. Determined to address the issue head-on, Evelyn accompanied a team of officers to the scene later that evening. By the time they arrived, a small crowd had gathered, voicing their frustrations loudly. Haskins stood near his patrol car, visibly agitated as people confronted him. When Evelyn stepped forward, introducing herself as the new captain, the mood shifted slightly. Some residents recognized her name from recent announcements and quieted down to hear what she had to say. "Thank you all for bringing this to our attention," Evelyn began, her voice steady and reassuring. "I understand your concerns, and I assure you we take matters like this very seriously. Please know that we're committed to ensuring fairness and respect in every interaction." Her words calmed the crowd somewhat, but the damage had already been done. Haskins stood silently, avoiding eye contact with both Evelyn and the residents. He knew he'd messed up, again, and there was no denying it this time. As Evelyn thanked the crowd and promised follow-up action, Haskins felt a sinking sensation in his chest. This wasn't just another complaint. It was a public spectacle, and his reputation was on the line. Later that night, back at the station, Evelyn called Haskins into her office. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the overhead lights. Haskins sat stiffly in the chair across from her desk, his hands clasped tightly together. He braced himself for the worst, convinced she was about to tear into him. Instead, Evelyn surprised him by starting the conversation calmly. "Officer Haskins," she said, leaning forward slightly, "we need to talk about what happened today. I've reviewed the footage, and I have to say your approach raised serious concerns." Haskins opened his mouth to defend himself, but Evelyn held up a hand, signaling him to wait. "Before you respond, let me be clear. This isn't about punishment. It's about understanding. Tell me honestly, why did you feel the need to question that young man so aggressively?" For a moment, Haskins hesitated. Then, slowly, he began to speak. I thought something seemed off, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. But maybe I overstepped. I don't know. Evelyn nodded, her expression thoughtful. It's important to trust your instincts, but we also have to be mindful of how our actions affect others. Perception matters, especially in situations like this. Do you see why people might feel targeted by your approach? Haskins swallowed hard, nodding reluctantly. For the first time, he allowed himself to consider the impact of his behavior, not just on the individuals he interacted with, but on the broader community. It was a sobering realization, one that left him feeling uneasy yet strangely relieved. Maybe, just maybe, Evelyn wasn't out to destroy him. Perhaps she genuinely wanted to help him grow. As the meeting concluded, Evelyn reiterated her commitment to supporting her officers while holding them accountable. Change isn't easy, she told him, but it's necessary. Let's work together to make sure incidents like this don't happen again. Haskins left her office feeling conflicted. On one hand, he appreciated her willingness to listen. On the other, he knew he had a lot of work to do, if not to redeem himself, then at least to regain the trust of those around him. Little did he realized this was only the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything he thought he knew about policing, fairness, and himself. The days following Evelyn's meeting with Haskins were a turning point, not just for him but for the entire department. Word spread quickly about the viral video of his aggressive stop and Evelyn's subsequent intervention. While some officers admired her balanced approach, others whispered behind closed doors, criticizing her for coddling the community instead of backing her own team. The division within the ranks grew more apparent, forcing Evelyn to navigate a delicate balancing act between enforcing accountability and maintaining morale. Haskins, meanwhile, found himself spiraling into paranoia. Every glance from a colleague, every casual comment felt like a veiled judgment. He couldn't shake the feeling that everyone knew about his mistakes, and worse, that they pitied him. Determined to prove he wasn't beyond saving, he threw himself into his work with reckless abandon. He volunteered for high-profile assignments, hoping to demonstrate loyalty and competence. But his desperation only made things worse. Instead of thinking clearly, he acted impulsively, often ignoring protocol in favor of quick results. One such assignment came when reports surfaced of a domestic dispute in a predominantly black neighborhood. Dispatch flagged it as urgent, and Haskins seized the opportunity to show he could handle pressure. Arriving at the scene first, he jumped out of his patrol car without waiting for backup, eager to take charge. Inside the modest house, voices echoed loudly, a man shouting, a woman pleading, and children crying in the background. Neighbors stood outside, watching anxiously as Haskins stormed through the door. Inside, chaos reigned. A young man paced angrily near the living room, while a woman clutched her arm, wincing in pain. Two small children huddled together on the couch, wide-eyed and trembling. Haskins immediately zeroed in on the man, barking orders for him to put his hands up. The man complied reluctantly, but his frustration boiled over. "I didn't do nothing wrong," he snapped. "She tripped and fell." Without giving the situation proper context, Haskins escalated quickly. His tone turned sharp, accusatory. "Don't lie to me," he growled. "We both know what happened here." Ignoring the woman's attempts to explain, he handcuffed the man roughly and dragged him toward the door. The woman protested, tears streaming down her face. "Please, officer, it was an accident," she cried. "He didn't mean to hurt me." By the time Evelyn arrived on the scene, alerted by concerned neighbors, the damage had already been done. She stepped out of her car to find the man sitting sullenly in the back of Haskins' patrol vehicle, while the woman sobbed uncontrollably on the porch. Neighbors surrounded her, voicing their outrage. One elderly woman approached Evelyn directly, gripping her arm tightly. "Captain Carter, please help us," she pleaded. "This isn't right. That man didn't deserve this." Evelyn's heart sank as she took in the scene. Approaching Haskins, she asked calmly, "What's going on here?" Haskins stiffened, his face flushing red. "Domestic disturbance," he muttered defensively. Guy got violent with his wife. I did what I had to do. Evelyn frowned, glancing at the distraught woman still seated on the porch. Did you hear her side of the story? She asked pointedly. She confirmed it. Herself, Haskins shot back, though his voice lacked conviction. Look, Captain, I followed procedure. No, Officer Haskins, you didn't, Evelyn replied firmly, her tone leaving no room for argument. Procedure requires gathering all the facts before making arrests. You ignored the victim's account and acted solely on assumption. That's not acceptable. Her words cut deep, silencing Haskins instantly. For a moment he looked like he might argue, but something in Evelyn's gaze stopped him. Instead, he clenched his jaw and stared at the ground, humiliated in front of his colleagues and the community. Evelyn wasted no time taking control of the situation. She reassured the woman that her voice mattered and encouraged her to share exactly what had happened. With gentle persistence, Evelyn pieced together the truth. The couple had argued, yes, but the injury occurred when the woman accidentally slipped during the heated exchange. There was no intent to harm, and the man hadn't laid a hand on her. Once the full picture emerged, Evelyn ordered Haskins to release him, much to the relief of the gathered crowd. As the tension eased, Evelyn addressed the neighbors, thanking them for speaking up. Your voices matter, she emphasized. If you ever feel we're not handling a situation fairly, don't hesitate to reach out. We're here to serve you. The crowd dispersed slowly, murmurs of gratitude rippling through the group. Evelyn then turned her attention back to Haskins, who stood awkwardly beside his patrol car, avoiding eye contact. We need to talk, she said simply, motioning for him to follow her. Back at the station, Evelyn led Haskins into her office once again. This time, however, there was no trace of patience in her demeanor. Closing the door firmly behind them, she fixed him with a steely gaze. Officer Haskins, I'm going to be blunt. What happened today was unacceptable. Not only did you violate protocol, but you also undermined trust in this community. Do you understand how serious that is? Haskins nodded mutely, unable to meet her eyes. His mind raced, replaying the events of the past few weeks. Each misstep, each accusation, weighed heavily on him now. He wanted to defend himself, to explain that he was just trying to do his job, but the words caught in his throat. How could he justify behavior that even he knew was wrong? Evelyn leaned forward, softening slightly. I get it. You're under pressure. Maybe you think I'm singling you out because of our history. But let me make one thing clear. This isn't personal. It's about protecting the integrity of this department and rebuilding trust with the people we serve. If you can't adapt, if you keep letting your biases dictate your actions, then you're putting everyone at risk, including yourself. Her words struck a chord. For the first time, Haskins allowed himself to confront the reality of his situation. He'd spent years believing he was untouchable, that his instincts were infallible. Now, faced with undeniable evidence of his failures, he realized how far he'd strayed from the principles of fairness and justice he'd once sworn to uphold. I messed up, he admitted finally, his voice barely audible. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I see now that I wasn't. Evelyn nodded, satisfied that he was beginning to acknowledge his mistakes. Admitting that is the first step, she said. But acknowledgement alone isn't enough. You need to commit to change, not just for your sake, but for the sake of this department and the community. Over the next several days, Evelyn implemented a series of measures designed to address systemic issues within the force. She introduced mandatory training sessions on implicit bias and de-escalation techniques, emphasizing the importance of empathy and active listening. Officers were required to participate in community engagement programs, fostering dialogue and understanding between law enforcement and residents. Haskins attended these sessions reluctantly at first, but as he listened to stories from community members and colleagues alike, he began to see the bigger picture. Despite his initial resistance, Haskins started showing signs of improvement. He became more mindful of his interactions, striving to listen rather than assume. Though progress was slow, Evelyn noticed the effort and acknowledged it privately, offering encouragement without excusing past behavior. Still, challenges remained. Some officers resented Evelyn's reforms, viewing them as unnecessary or overly restrictive. Tensions simmered beneath the surface, threatening to boil over at any moment. And while Haskins was making strides, he couldn't escape the lingering doubts from his peers or himself. Would he ever truly earn back the trust he'd lost? Could he rise above his flaws and become the kind of officer he'd always claimed to be? For Evelyn, the road ahead was long and fraught with obstacles, but she remained steadfast, driven by a belief that real change was possible if people were willing to face uncomfortable truths and embrace growth. As she watched Haskins struggle to reinvent himself, she couldn't help but wonder whether redemption was truly within reach for him, for the department, and for the fractured relationship between police and the communities they served. As weeks turned into months, the ripple effects of Evelyn's leadership began to reshape the department in subtle yet profound ways. The mandatory training sessions on implicit bias and de-escalation techniques were met with mixed reactions. Some officers embraced the lessons, recognizing their value in improving relationships with the community. Others, however, resisted fiercely, dismissing the exercises as soft or unnecessary. Among those who struggled most was Officer Greg Haskins. Haskins had always prided himself on being a seasoned cop, a man whose instincts guided him through even the toughest situations. But now, he found himself questioning everything he thought he knew about policing. The training videos showed real-life examples of officers mishandling encounters due to prejudice or haste, leading to tragic outcomes. As he watched these scenarios unfold, Haskins couldn't help but see parallels between them and his own actions. Each clip felt like a mirror reflecting his flaws back at him, forcing him to confront uncomfortable truths. During one particularly intense session, an instructor posed a hypothetical scenario. A young black teenager is seen walking late at night in a wealthy neighborhood carrying a backpack. What do you do? Most officers responded cautiously, suggesting they'd observe from a distance or ask non-threatening questions. But when it came time for Haskins to share his approach, he hesitated. Memories of past stops flooded his mind, times when he'd jumped to conclusions based solely on appearance. He mumbled something vague about assessing the situation before acting, earning skeptical looks from colleagues seated nearby. Afterward, Evelyn pulled him aside. "I saw your hesitation," she said gently. "It's okay to feel unsure. That means you're thinking critically about your choices. Keep working on it." Her words offered a sliver of encouragement, but Haskins still wrestled with self-doubt. At home, sleep eluded him as guilt gnawed at his conscience. He replayed moments from his career, the traffic stops, the aggressive interrogations, the dismissive attitudes, all of which suddenly seemed glaringly wrong. For years, he'd justified his behavior by telling himself he was protecting people, keeping them safe. Now, he wondered how many lives he might have damaged along the way. Meanwhile, tension within the department continued to simmer. A small faction of officers openly opposed Evelyn's reforms, claiming they undermined authority and made the job harder. They argued that focusing too much on politics distracted from the real work of law enforcement. Some even suggested Evelyn was using her position to push a personal agenda. These whispers reached Haskins' ears, fueling his paranoia. Was he being singled out because of his history with her? Or worse, was he being used as an example to intimidate others? The pressure mounted further when Evelyn announced plans to launch a formal investigation into allegations of misconduct against Haskins. The news spread like wildfire, sparking heated debates among the ranks. Supporters of reform applauded the move, saying it was long overdue. Critics called it unfair, arguing that Haskins wasn't the only officer with complaints filed against him. Caught in the middle, Haskins braced for what felt like an inevitable downfall. The investigation unearthed troubling details. Former victims came forward, sharing stories of humiliation and fear stemming from encounters with Haskins. One woman recounted how he'd accused her of shoplifting during a routine store visit, detaining her in front of customers despite having no evidence. Another described being pulled over repeatedly for minor infractions, each stop ending with thinly veiled accusations of wrongdoing. Hearing these accounts broke something inside Haskins. He'd never considered the lasting impact of his actions, or lack thereof, on the people he swore to protect. Faced with mounting evidence, Haskins spiraled emotionally. Nights became unbearable as shame consumed him. He started drinking heavily, seeking solace in alcohol to numb the pain. His once impeccable uniform grew wrinkled, his posture slouched. Colleagues noticed the change, whispering behind his back about how far he'd fallen. Even those sympathetic to his plight kept their distance, unsure how to help someone so lost in despair. One evening, after another grueling day at the station, Haskins sat alone in his dimly lit living room, staring blankly at the wall. His phone buzzed incessantly with messages from friends and family checking in, but he ignored them all. Instead, he picked up an old photo album, flipping through pictures of his early days on the force. Back then, he'd been full of pride and purpose, eager to make a difference. Somewhere along the way, though, he'd lost sight of that vision. How had he strayed so far from the ideals he once held dear? Lost in thought, Haskins didn't hear the knock on his door until it grew, persistent. Reluctantly, he shuffled over and opened it to find Evelyn standing there. Her expression was calm but serious, devoid of judgment. "Can we talk?" she asked simply. Surprised, Haskins nodded and stepped aside, inviting her in. They sat across from each other in silence for a moment before Evelyn spoke. "I know this has been hard for you," she began, "but I also know you're capable of better. You've spent years building walls around yourself, convincing yourself that certain people don't deserve respect. It's time to tear those walls down." Her honesty caught him off guard. Tears welled in his eyes as he struggled to respond. "I don't know if I can fix this," he admitted finally, his voice cracking. "I've hurt so many people. Maybe I'm just not cut out for this anymore." Evelyn leaned forward, her gaze steady. "Quitting won't solve anything. Running away won't undo the harm you've caused. If you truly want redemption, you need to face it head on. Apologize where you can, learn from your mistakes, and commit to doing better. Not because you have to, but because it's the right thing to do." For the first time in months, Haskins felt a flicker of hope. It was faint, fragile, but undeniable. Evelyn's words reminded him that change wasn't impossible. It required effort, humility, and courage. As she rose to leave, she placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're not alone in this," she said softly. "We'll get through it together." Over the following weeks, Haskins took tentative steps toward accountability. With Evelyn's guidance, he reached out to some of the individuals he'd wronged, offering heartfelt apologies. Not everyone accepted them, understandably wary of empty promises. But a few did, their forgiveness providing a glimmer of light in the darkness. Slowly, painfully, Haskins began rebuilding trust, not just with the community, but with himself. Within the department, opinions remained divided. While some praised Evelyn's commitment to justice, others accused her of favoritism, pointing to Haskins's gradual rehabilitation as proof. Tensions flared during roll calls and briefings, with arguments erupting over the direction of the force. Yet amid the chaos, there were signs of progress. Officers who had initially resisted the reform started applying new techniques in the field, reporting improved interactions with residents. Community members noticed the shift, expressing cautious optimism about the future. For Evelyn, the journey was far from over. She understood that true transformation required patience and perseverance. Holding officers accountable was only part of the equation. Fostering empathy and understanding was equally crucial. As she watched Haskins grapple with his demons, she couldn't help but reflect on the broader challenges facing law enforcement. Change wouldn't happen overnight, but every step forward, even the smallest ones, mattered. By the end of the month, the formal investigation concluded, recommending disciplinary action against Haskins. Though spared termination, he faced suspension without pay and mandatory counseling. The decision sparked debate both inside and outside the department, with some calling it lenient and others viewing it as fair. For Haskins, the punishment stung, but it also served as a wake-up Call. He vowed to use this second chance wisely, determined to prove that he could rise above his past. As winter settled over the city, bringing colder nights and quieter streets, Evelyn stood outside the station, gazing at the horizon. Challenges lay ahead, no doubt, but she believed in the potential for growth, for individuals, for institutions, and for society as a whole. Whether Haskins would fully embrace redemption remained uncertain, but one thing was clear. The seeds of change had been planted. All they needed now was time to grow. Months passed since the formal investigation into Officer Greg Haskins' conduct, and the department began to settle into a new rhythm. The reforms implemented by Captain Evelyn Carter were no longer seen as temporary measures, but as permanent fixtures shaping the future of law enforcement in the precinct. While tensions still lingered among some officers who resented the changes, others embraced them, recognizing that accountability and empathy weren't weaknesses, they were strengths. Haskins, now back from his suspension, returned to work with a renewed sense of purpose. His time away had been difficult, forcing him to confront not only his professional failures but also his personal shortcomings. Counseling sessions helped him unpack years of ingrained biases, teaching him how to challenge assumptions and approach situations with an open mind. It wasn't easy. There were moments when frustration bubbled over, but he persevered, knowing this was his last chance to salvage both his career and his integrity. Evelyn kept a close eye on him, ensuring he adhered to the guidelines set forth during his rehabilitation. She assigned him to partner with rookie officers, hoping his experience combined with their fresh perspectives would create a balanced dynamic. At first, Haskins felt out of place mentoring newcomers, fearing they might judge him for his past mistakes. But as he worked alongside them, sharing lessons learned through trial and error, he realized something unexpected. These young officers respected him, not despite his flaws, but because of his willingness to grow. One such partnership involved a bright-eyed recruit named Marcus, who came from the very neighborhood Haskins used to patrol with suspicion. Initially, Haskins worried about working with someone so different from himself, but Marcus proved to be patient and insightful. During one shift, they responded to a call about a disturbance at a local park. A group of teenagers had gathered late at night, playing loud music and drawing complaints from nearby residents. In the past, Haskins might have stormed in, demanding compliance and issuing citations. This time, however, he let Marcus take the lead. Marcus approached the teens calmly, introducing himself and asking if they could lower the volume. To everyone's surprise, they agreed without argument, even apologizing for disturbing the peace. Afterward, Marcus turned to Haskins with a grin. "See? Sometimes all it takes is treating people like humans." The comment hit home for Haskins, reminding him how much he'd relied on intimidation rather than connection. He nodded thoughtfully, silently vowing to adopt a similar mindset moving forward. Meanwhile, Evelyn continued her efforts to bridge gaps between the police force and the community. She organized town hall meetings where residents could voice concerns directly to officers, fostering dialogue and mutual understanding. These gatherings weren't always smooth. Emotions ran high, and old grievances surfaced. But they paved the way for meaningful conversations. Slowly but surely, trust began to rebuild, one interaction at a time. Word of Evelyn's leadership spread beyond the precinct, earning recognition from city officials and advocacy groups alike. She became a sought-after speaker at conferences, sharing insights on reforming policing practices and promoting equity. Yet despite her growing influence, she remained grounded, prioritizing the needs of her team and the community above accolades. 4. Haskins' redemption came in small victories. One day, while patrolling, he encountered a familiar face, the woman whose traffic stop had sparked this entire chain of events. Dr. Evelyn Carter herself stood beside her car, speaking with another officer about a minor fender bender. When she noticed Haskins approaching, her expression softened slightly. "Officer Haskins," she said, nodding politely. "Captain Carter," he replied, hesitating before adding, "I just wanted to say thank you for everything." Evelyn raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Thank me? You didn't give up on me, Haskins explained, his voice thick with emotion. Even when I probably deserved it. You gave me a chance to do better, and I won't waste it. Her lips curved into a faint smile. It's not about giving up or holding grudges. It's about believing in the possibility of change for everyone. Their brief exchange marked a turning point in their relationship. No longer adversaries, they found common ground rooted in shared goals. Evelyn saw Haskins not as a cautionary tale, but as proof that growth was possible, even under the most challenging circumstances. And Haskins, humbled yet hopeful, resolved to honor her faith in him by continuing to improve. As the year drew to a close, the department held its annual award ceremony to celebrate achievements and milestones. Among the honorees was Marcus, recognized for outstanding performance during his rookie year. As Evelyn presented him with the award, she glanced toward Haskins seated in the audience, acknowledging his role in mentoring the young officer. Haskins sat quietly, pride swelling in his chest, not for himself but for the legacy he hoped to leave behind. Later that evening, Evelyn reflected on the journey thus far. Progress hadn't come easily. There were setbacks, resistance, and moments of doubt. But every step forward reinforced her belief in humanity's capacity for transformation. Whether addressing systemic issues within the department or guiding individuals like Haskins toward redemption, she understood that true change required collective effort. Standing outside the station beneath a starlit sky, Evelyn allowed herself a rare moment of quiet satisfaction. Challenges undoubtedly lay ahead, but she faced them with optimism. The road to justice and equality was long, winding, and often fraught with obstacles. Still, she knew that persistence, compassion, and courage could light the way. And so the story of Evelyn Carter and Greg Haskins served as a testament to resilience and renewal. Their paths, once colliding in conflict, intertwined in pursuit of a greater purpose. Together, they reminded others that accountability isn't punishment, it's an opportunity to learn, to heal, and to build a brighter future for all.